All right, what's up, everybody? It's Mr. Martinez here, and today we are going to start a lesson on classifying quadrilaterals. So our last lesson was working on classifying triangles, and we noticed as we identified polygons as triangles, we learned that we can get more specific in classifying these triangles. So instead of just saying triangle, there are different types of triangles like isosceles, scalene, and right triangles. Obtuse, acute, all of these different types of classifications for triangles. And quadrilaterals are just the same. Okay. So now quadrilaterals, one thing about quadrilaterals is they are a lot more classification of quadrilaterals. There's a lot more specific characteristics that make things quadrilateral. So I made this PowerPoint presentation so we can kind of go over it and we can kind of just breaking down quadrilaterals. So as you know, just by the name quad, right? Quad means four. So a four-sided polygon is, which is the reason why it's called a quadrilateral. Right? Quadrilateral is a four-sided polygon. So stuff like squares that we know and rectangles. So we're gonna get a little more in depth about the different types of quadrilaterals in this lesson. Okay, so let's start off. So first and foremost, what is a quadrilateral? As we discussed, it is a polygon with exactly four sides, four angles, and four vertices, right? So there are different types of names that we call these quadrilaterals, and one quadrilateral can be all of these names at the same time. So that's the tricky part about quadrilaterals, that it can not just it doesn't just have one name; it might have a whole different type of names. Okay, so we're gonna go through some examples later on. So we have a parallelogram, we have a rectangle, we have a rhombus, a square, a trapezoid, and a kite. So let's go on to our first one. All right. So the first thing we have is a parallelogram, and a parallelogram is the way we classify a parallelogram is when a quadrilateral has both pairs of the opposite sides are parallel. Now, what does parallel mean? Okay, so if we look, let me see. Let me get this going here. Oops, it's not what I wanted. So if we take a look, right, if these lines continue to go, right, if the opposites continue to go, notice that if they continue to go on and forever, they will never cross each other. So when two lines of opposite sides never cross, they're called parallel. Okay, so how do I classify a quadrilateral as a parallelogram? And that is having two pairs of parallel sides. So notice how this one right here, right, and this one right here, they are parallel. Those opposite sides are parallel, and these two lines right here are parallel as well. So the fact that I have two pairs of parallel sides will identify this quadrilateral as a parallelogram. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So I also have the arrows there for you, as you can see. Notice how these are parallel and these are parallel with each other. All right, excellent. Now let's move on to our next one. Now we have a rhombus, And now what is a rhombus? Okay, a rhombus is a parallelogram, so it has to be a parallelogram with four congruent sides. Okay, so first of all, that does not make it a regular polygon, because just because it has four congruent sides doesn't mean it has four congruent angles. So remember, a regular polygon needs to be a perfect shape. So it needs to have congruent sides and congruent angles. Okay, so it is a parallelogram and it has four congruent sides. Okay, so if we can notice here, notice how all sides, so if this one is 4 inches, in order for it to be a rhombus, this side needs to be 4 inches, this side needs to be 4 inches, this side needs to be 4 inches. And it is also considered a parallelogram. Why? Because if you notice, this line and this line are parallel, and then we have this line with this line parallel. So notice how they'll never cross. So a rhombus is also considered a parallelogram. All right. Next, something that we're very familiar with, right? One of our most common shapes that we discuss um, throughout your elementary career, right? And this is called a rectangle. And a rectangle is a parallelogram. So as you can see, a lot of these quadrilaterals can be considered parallelograms. It is a parallelogram with four right angles. Okay, so kind of like the rhombus, right, with congruent sides, right? But this is just with the angles. It needs to have four right angles. All right, so a parallelogram with four right angles. So it is a parallelogram because this and this, right? They're parallel. And then this line with this line is considered parallel. They will never cross each other, right? So if you can see, I have the little symbols there for you. And then if you see our little boxes, remember with the triangles, identifying a right triangle, we know that the box symbol represents a 90-degree angle, which is called a right angle. So now let's go to it. Remember that I talked to you about a triangle is 180 degrees, right? Remember we said 180 degrees would be a triangle, always, no matter what. If you add up all the degrees or angles of a triangle to give you 180 degrees, how many degrees would a quadrilateral have? A quadrilateral always has the same amount of degrees when you add up all the angles or all of the degrees. So this is a pretty easy example. So if we know this is a right angle, we have 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 90 degrees. So I know 90 times 4 will give me the amount of degrees of this total quadrilateral or rectangle, right? So I know 4 times 9 would be 36, and I bring down the 0. So a quadrilateral, all quadrilaterals have a total degree of 360 degrees, okay? So that's a little fun fact for you. So before we move on, a rectangle is a parallelogram, right? Because opposite sides are parallel and it has 4 right angles. It must always, in order for it to be a rectangle, it must have 4 of these right angles. If it doesn't, if it has 3, then it cannot be one. All right. Next one. Now we have a square. Okay, this is the perfect, right? This is the only regular polygon amongst quadrilaterals. It is the perfect quadrilateral. Why? Let's get into it. It is a parallelogram. It has 4 congruent sides. So what does that mean? So if this is 4 inches, this side is 4 inches, and this side is 4 inches, and this side is 4 inches. So all sides must be congruent, kind of like a rhombus. So a square, right, is considered a rhombus, right? Because it has 4 congruent sides. What else does it have? It has 4 right angles. So let's go. So here it's going to show you the little symbols there telling you that they are congruent. And it has 4 right angles. Just so, is a square considered a rectangle? The answer is yes. A square is a rectangle because it has 4 90-degree angles. Okay, so this is why I consider it the perfect shape, because it is the only regular polygon which is considered a quadrilateral, right? A perfect shape. All right. So like I said here, it is also a rhombus and it is also considered a rectangle. So a square is a parallelogram. It is a rhombus. It is a rectangle. And of course, it is a square. All right. So a square is a regular parallelogram. Like I said, a regular polygon. All right, let's move on to a kite. Something that we don't really see, we're not going to see a lot of that in our classwork and our test, but I did want to include this here. So what is a kite? Think of like a kite that when you fly a kite, right? A standard generic kite like you see right here in this picture, right? A quadrilateral with 2 pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So what does consecutive mean? So the side next to it. So if I look right here, right? If I'm going to look at this side right here and this side right here, I can tell that they are congruent. So if this is 3 inches, this would be 3 inches. And then if this side, what's next to this side will be this side would be equal. So if this is 7 inches, this one right here would also be 7 inches. So the sides next to each other would be congruent, right? Notice how they're not parallel, right? If this continues to go straight and this continues to go straight, they're eventually going to cross. So it cannot be a parallelogram. It is just considered a kite, all right? So like I said, we're not really going to be seeing a lot of these, but you might come across them. That's why I wanted to include this in this lesson. All right, so no opposite sides are congruent and no parallel sides. All right, now let's get into a trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral, a little typo there, with exactly, let me fix that. No, that's not what I wanted. With exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. So notice, look at the symbol there. If this line kept going, and this line kept going, it is parallel. Now, would it be considered a parallelogram? The answer is no. Why? Because a parallelogram has 2 pairs of parallel sides, and this only has 1 pair. Because if I look at this line right here, if it were to kept going, this one kept going, it would be perpendicular. They would intersect and cross, which would not make it a parallelogram. So a trapezoid has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides, okay? I kind of look at a trapezoid kind of like a triangle with its head cut off, right? This would be a triangle, and the tip of it was cut off, so it would be considered like a trapezoid. All right, so let's go into something a little specific about a trapezoid. What is an isosceles trapezoid? An isosceles trapezoid is when it has the non-parallel sides, so the non-parallel will be these sides right here, are congruent. So think of an isosceles triangle to have two congruent sides, so kind of like this right here, right? So for example, if this was 3 inches, right, it would be isosceles, it would be congruent to the opposite side, right? Because they are congruent. Yeah, that's the one pair of parallel sides, and if you look at the sides, those uh, those opposite sides are congruent, kind of like an isosceles triangle, has two sides that are congruent. All right, so here we kind of have the quadrilateral family tree, just a little breakdown of everything that falls under. Think of it like a family tree, how everything falls under it. We have the kites, you have your trapezoid, and you have your parallelograms, and then against the specifics. All right. You guys can pause the video if you guys want to take a picture of that. All right, now just definitions. So just again, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides. A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. We have the square, remember the perfect quadrilateral, right? Is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, like a rhombus, and 4 right angles, like a rectangle. We have the kite, is with the quadrilateral that has 2 pairs of adjacent or consecutive sides congruent and no opposite sides are congruent. And then we have a trapezoid, which is a quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. And if you wanted to make an isosceles trapezoid, which I'm not really going to be asking you to identify that, but the opposite, it would have 2 pairs of congruent sides. All right, just another family tree here, so you guys can take a look at it. Well, we're going to pause the video and screenshot it or take a picture. All right, so now let's classify. So let's get into classifying, because this is going to be how we're going to be doing it for our classwork. Okay, so how can I classify quadrilaterals? So let's look at shape, the blue shape right now. All right, so we have to describe it, right? So for your assignment, we're going to be describing the quadrilaterals in as many ways as possible. So now let's look at the blue shape right here. So first, is the blue shape, first of all, obviously it's a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. Now, does it have 90-degree angles? It sure looks like it. So it can be a rectangle, right? Do the sides look congruent? The sides do look congruent, so it could be a rhombus, correct? Are opposite sides parallel? Opposite sides are parallel, right? Parallel, right? They have the 90 degrees. And all sides are congruent. So it could be a parallelogram, it could be a rectangle, it could be a rhombus. So, and also, it pretty much meets all the criterias, right? Makes everything perfect, so that it can also be considered a square. So if I were to describe or classify this quadrilateral, I would make it a square, a rectangle, a rhombus, and a parallelogram. Okay, so there it is right there. Square, because it matches everything. It's a parallelogram, it has 4 90-degree angles, and it has 4 congruent sides. All right, now let's look on the one on the right. So now, how can I classify this? Right, first and foremost, obviously it's a quadrilateral. We don't have to label that because we know it's a quadrilateral, it has 4 sides. Now, can it be a rectangle? Does it have 90-degree angles? No, it doesn't. It does not have the, if you make a little box, it won't give you that perfect 90-degree angle. So it can be a rectangle. So if it can be a rectangle, it can be a rhombus. Are sides equal? Even though it's kind of hard to tell, I would say that this side and this side are equal, but this side and this side are equal, right? So this side is a little shorter. So let's just say this would be 7 inches, 7 inches, 4 inches, and 4 inches. Just a little example, just to help you clarify. All right, so it can be a rhombus, it can be a rectangle. So that means it can be a square. All right, now, are opposite sides parallel? Is this side parallel with this side? Sure, it looks like it. And this side parallel with this side. So my classification would be, obviously it's quadrilateral, it can't be a square, it can't be a rectangle, it can't be a rhombus, it can't be a trapezoid because there's 2 pairs of parallel sides, not 1. So I would just name it a standard plain old parallelogram, okay? I hope that I kind of clarified that as easy, making this as easy as possible for you guys. All right, so let's continue going over classifying quadrilaterals, all right? Now next one. Okay, I'm gonna include sides on some of these just to help you out a little bit. So let's just say, I'm gonna keep going, 4 inches. So if you're catching on to the patterns here, right? I just wrote 4 inches for all sides. So I just labeled that all sides are congruent. So if all sides are congruent, that means automatically it is a rhombus, right? Rhombus is all sides congruent. All sides must be congruent, all equal sides, so it is a rhombus. Now, can it be a rectangle? It can be a rectangle because it doesn't have those 90-degree angles. Okay, it does not have 90-degree angles, so it can't be. Can it be a parallelogram? The answer is yes, obviously, because if you look at this one and this side, those sides will never meet. They are parallel. This side and the opposite side, those will never meet. So those are also parallel. So I would go with a rhombus, and I would also go with a parallelogram. Now, can it be considered a kite? Can it be considered a kite? Next, the one next to this, right, is equal, right? So remember, consecutive sides. So this one is equal to this one is equal to this one, so it can also be considered a kite. That one's a little tricky, but so I would say it's a rhombus, it's a parallelogram, and it is considered a kite. All right. All right. Now, next one. This is classified as blue shape. All right. Obviously, quadrilateral. We discussed this. Can it be a parallelogram? Are opposite sides parallel? This one and this one are parallel. Excellent. But how about this one and this one? Notice if these keep going, they'll eventually cross, so that cannot be a parallelogram. So it only has one pair of parallel sides. So if it has one pair of parallel sides, that means it is already a trapezoid, okay? It can be a rectangle. It can be a rectangle because it doesn't have the 90 degrees. It can't be a rhombus because not all sides are congruent. It can be it can be a kite because the consecutive sides aren't congruent. So this one and this one is not congruent, and this isn't congruent. So my guess, it would only be a trapezoid. That would be the best way of classifying this quadrilateral. So it's just a plain old trapezoid. It can technically also be it can also be considered a isosceles trapezoid, because if this one is 5 inches, right, this side and this side are congruent. So it would also be an isosceles trapezoid, but you can just call it a trapezoid. Don't even worry about calling it an isosceles trapezoid. All right, this is gonna be our last sets. All right, so let's look at the green shape. First and foremost, it is a quadrilateral. Our sides parallel. Opposite sides are parallel. Those two sides are parallel. Those two sides are parallel. So it is a parallelogram. I can see that it has 4 right angles, so it is a rectangle and a parallelogram. Now, would it be a rhombus? Are sides equal? My answer is no, because if you notice, this side and this side are equal, but these two sides are shorter than the ones on the top and on the bottom. So remember, in order for it to be a rhombus and a square, it will need to have also congruent sides. So the answer for this quadrilateral will be a parallelogram and a rectangle. All right. All right, now last but not least. Okay, then we're gonna do a little quiz at the end. All right, how would I classify this? Obviously, just by looking at it, we can tell the opposite sides aren't parallel. It doesn't even have any parallel sides, so it can't even be a trapezoid. Sides are not congruent, so it can't be a rhombus. There's no 90-degree angles. There's not 4 90-degree angles, so it can't be a rectangle. But I do know that this side right here and this side looks the same, and this side look the same. So consecutive sides are the same, so I would just consider it a kite. All right. So we waited through. So these are the best examples on how your assignment is gonna look like. Okay, so it's gonna be how to classify. All right. Now, complete each statement. So a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. So we need a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. So if we go back to our definitions of the rules of classifying quadrilaterals, the only shapes that will always have 4 right angles would be a rectangle and a square. So our answers are going to be a rectangle and a square, or rectangle or square. All right. So now next one. Number 2, a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So it's like a regular polygon, a perfect shape. So what is the only quadrilateral that is a perfect shape? It needs to have 4 congruent 90-degree angles and 4 congruent sides. And that answer would always be the perfect square. Now let's look at number 3, a figure with 4 sides and 4 angles. So it just needs to have 4 sides, and it just needs to have 4 angles. So don't be thinking classifying If it has 4 sides and 4 angles, the basic way of describing it is a simple quadrilateral. Okay, very simple. If it has 4 sides, 4 angles, that's a 4-sided polygon. It is a quadrilateral. Now, give the most descriptive name for this quadrilateral. So how do I describe this quadrilateral? It's showing me that it has one set of parallel sides and these two are not parallel, right? Sorry for the bad drawing there. So it has one set of parallel sides. So my guess would be it is a trapezoid, okay? And that is it. All right, guys, I hope this lesson helped you in classifying. Please message me, call me. If you need help on the assignment, I'm here to help you. Okay, I hope you guys are being safe. I hope you guys are listening to your parents. And I hope you guys are doing the best that you can with this whole distance learning thing. I know I'm trying my best. If you guys want any tips, if you guys need any tips or you guys want to give me tips or some advice on how to make these lessons better, just please let me know. All right, I'm here to help you. All right, guys? Have a good one. Let me disregard that.